On January 24, 2026, a U.S. citizen was shot and killed by federal immigration agents during an enforcement operation in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The incident has triggered nationwide protests, intensified political debate, and renewed scrutiny of federal immigration enforcement inside the United States. This report examines what is known so far, how authorities have responded, and why this case matters beyond Minneapolis. According to official statements, federal immigration agents were conducting a large-scale operation targeting undocumented migrants in South Minneapolis. During the operation, agents encountered 37-year-old Alex Pretti, an intensive care unit nurse and U.S. citizen. Federal authorities state that Pretti interfered with the operation and posed a threat, prompting agents to open fire in what they describe as self-defense. However, video footage recorded by bystanders shows Pretti unarmed at the time of the shooting. The footage has raised questions about the federal account of events. Pretti was pronounced dead shortly after being transported to a local hospital. This was the second fatal shooting involving federal immigration agents in Minneapolis within the same month. The Department of Homeland Security has defended the actions of its agents and announced an internal review. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz publicly condemned the operation, calling the shooting unacceptable and demanding the withdrawal of federal immigration agents from the state. Minneapolis city officials echoed these concerns, stating that the operation lacked coordination with local law enforcement. Several members of Congress from both parties have called for an independent federal investigation into the incident. Following the shooting, large protests erupted in Minneapolis and quickly spread to other major U.S. cities. Labor unions, healthcare organizations, and civil rights groups issued statements demanding accountability and policy reform. Business leaders in Minnesota released a joint letter urging de-escalation, warning that continued unrest could damage economic stability and public trust. The protests have remained largely peaceful but persistent, with demonstrators calling for limits on federal enforcement powers. Following the shooting, large protests erupted in Minneapolis and quickly spread to other major U.S. cities. Labor unions, healthcare organizations, and civil rights groups issued statements demanding accountability and policy reform. Business leaders in Minnesota released a joint letter urging de-escalation, warning that continued unrest could damage economic stability and public trust. The protests have remained largely peaceful but persistent, with demonstrators calling for limits on federal enforcement powers. A federal judge has issued a temporary restraining order aimed at preserving evidence related to the shooting. Legal experts note growing tension between state governments and federal agencies over jurisdiction, transparency, and use of force. At the national level, the incident has intensified debate over funding for immigration and customs enforcement and the Department of Homeland Security. Some lawmakers have warned that failure to resolve these disputes could affect upcoming budget negotiations in Congress. The Minneapolis case comes amid an expansion of federal immigration operations across several U.S. cities. Supporters argue these actions are necessary to enforce immigration law. Critics counter that aggressive tactics undermine civil liberties and strain relations with local communities. The case highlights a broader question facing U.S. policymakers: how to balance immigration enforcement with accountability and public oversight. While the incident is domestic, its impact extends beyond U.S. borders. America's handling of civil liberties and law enforcement is closely watched by allies and partners. Events like this may influence diplomatic discussions on human rights, migration policy, and cross-border cooperation, particularly with neighboring countries. What happened in Minneapolis is now under investigation, and key facts remain contested. What is clear is that the case has become a national test of transparency, federal authority, and public trust. As legal proceedings continue, attention will focus on whether independent oversight leads to accountability or further division. This is World Signals.